Welcome to the IVF Abroad podcast for people who are struggling with infertility and trying to conceive and who are facing more obstacles than options when it comes to having fertility testing or treatment in their home countries. Alongside other experts, I will share, educate and empower you on your journey and help you to learn more about going abroad for advanced fertility testing and treatments like IVF and egg donation. I'm Emma Haslam, your host, now mum of one, and the go-to expert in fertility treatment abroad. Since the birth of our son in 2018, I have made it my mission to make fertility treatment more informed, transparent, accessible, supported and affordable for more people. And I help people just like you to become unstuck, to find a best fit clinic that truly meets their needs and to have fertility treatment on their terms and timescales so they can achieve their dreams of growing their families. And I'm here now to help you too. Be sure to check out the free resources in the show notes for more help after listening to today's episode. Hello, it's Emma here. Welcome to this week's episode of the IVF Abroad podcast. And this week's episode is inspired by a conversation that I had this morning with somebody who isn't a client, somebody who's in my life, somebody who I work with, who is struggling to conceive. And she was asking me, what now? We're trying to have a baby and it's just not working. What do we do now? And this is something I hear a lot, sadly. And from the conversation I had this morning, it just reminds me of how hard this is and how emotionally draining, tiring, confusing, frustrating it is when you're in this situation and you're unsure, you're really unclear of what your next steps might be. So the aim of this episode is to chat this through and to help give you some food for thought, some clarity, some structure, some hope, some confidence, and a plan around what your next steps might be. When I was having this conversation this morning, and I have many conversations like this, but it just reminded me about the weight of infertility and how when you're trying to get pregnant for months or even years, how much it impacts you. It impacts your relationships. It changes you. It changed me. It impacts everything. Emotions, mental health, routines, self-confidence even, everything. And how much of it we take on board ourselves in terms of worrying that somehow this is our fault. And I want to just say to you, this is not your fault. The lady that I was speaking to this morning, she was explaining how her and her partner really think about diet and exercise, and they feel like they're doing all of the things and it's still not working, and talking about the impact of how this is affecting her and about some of the silly things that people have said to her, like, just relax, you're only young. She's 30, you're only young, and, silly things like that, and how she's felt dismissed by people. And chatting about the sort of cycle of hope, that like every month you're hopeful and then you've got the disappointment and then it's that try again. And it's wondering, how long do you keep trying before you think maybe there might be an issue? And at what point do you stop and think, right, something needs to change? And then where do you even go and what do you even do? And this is what we were chatting about this morning. So if you're at this starting point of wondering, like, what now? I'm hopeful that this will provide you with some food for thought and some suggestions around what your next steps might be. The other thing that I wanted to point out following my conversation this morning is that this is not your fault. When I speak to people, including this lady this morning, we just blame ourselves for the fact that things aren't working. And it isn't your fault. It's not your fault. And, the lady I spoke to this morning is on paper doing so many of the right, in inverted commas, things and is fit and healthy and yet still is berating herself for not doing enough. When actually, in fact, while these things will be helpful to her, it's possibly nothing to do with the reason why they can't conceive. But I just see the blame, how we, really berate ourselves when this is just something generally so out of our control. And I want you to just know that this is not your fault either. And also, if you are somebody that you're at the point of trying naturally, there's still power and information we gather from the time that we spend trying naturally. So it isn't wasted time, because often that gives a clinician, for example, information about your situation that is helpful in them recommending what might happen for next steps. And equally, if you've had a fertility treatment like IVF and you've had failed cycles, remember that an IVF cycle, for example, is both therapeutic in trying to get you the outcome of a baby, but also diagnostic. And we learn things through failed IVF cycles. So through the decisions that you have or haven't made so far, please do not think that you have wasted your time or that this is your fault, because it's just not. And it's also not very clear, is it, as to what point in time you should start to think, okay, maybe I need some outside intervention. If, for example, you are trying naturally or you are having fertility treatment at a private clinic or even through the NHS, and then you finish your NHS cycles and you're like, now what? At some point, it's like you've got to make these decisions about what to do next when you don't always know what your options might be. And people often stay in a trying phase for a long time because we're told different things about how long we should wait before, for example, going to see a GP here in the UK. If you're under the age of 35, some of them won't even entertain a conversation with you about even getting some baseline tests or a referral through to a gynecologist for if you've been trying for any less than 2 years. And we know that if you're over 35, that is potentially for some people too long. And so the system of the NHS can make it very difficult for people to actually get support when they feel that they want it due to the constraints of the NHS. And I'm not here to slag off the NHS, but due to the constraints and the timelines that they have to set because of funding. And that can then make people wait too long. So they may be trying for a considerable amount of time, not necessarily realising that then to try and get any support through the NHS then takes a long time, if anything at all comes of that. And so cumulatively, people can end up wasting so much time that then does become valuable because it's so much time has passed, or people are aware that maybe there are long waiting times for things like NHS referrals and are told by GPs that they won't refer them because they've not been trying long enough. So people are stuck in a catch-22 situation. And then, of course, once you've had that initial conversation with your GP, maybe they'll run some very basic baseline tests. And if they appear to be okay, you could be completely dismissed, when in fact, there's maybe things going on, but they're just not measured at that point. But if there are indications and they're happy to make a referral through to a gynecologist, it's usually to be looked at for IVF. It's not usually to help people have support around natural conception. Not everybody needs IVF, but that can come up as well. And, I think it's important to say that, for some people, fantastic if you can get a referral for IVF, if that's what you want and you can get it on the NHS, great. But in reality, a lot of people, even if they get that referral from a GP, are then turned down for IVF later. But you don't know what you don't know. And, often there isn't much support provided for people to try and get pregnant naturally. So there's this big void in between often for people who are hopeful that they're going to get this help. They wait for it, and then either they get nothing or it isn't the kind of support that they would have wanted. And that's because the NHS is just too stretched. It can't provide the services that people actually need. And the baseline tests that GPs do, if they're happy to run them, are so basic that you could be told, and people have been told, that there's nothing wrong when actually there are things going on. And so people again go back to trying naturally when things haven't been explored properly and get no further forwards. So that's the kind of picture here. And for people having fertility treatment, often people stick with the same clinic, and maybe over time their needs actually have changed as we've begun to learn more about, that kind of diagnostic side of things, but people haven't got the knowledge necessarily to go and find the right fertility clinic for their needs now, or they didn't know what to ask a fertility clinic in the beginning, because you don't, do you? Because you're not born with this knowledge. So that makes it really, really hard. Or people have had NHS treatment, but then use the same clinic privately following NHS cycles. And sometimes we're just not with the right clinic. And sometimes they might have been the right clinic in the beginning, but they're not the right clinic now. And so sometimes that trying phase also relates to trying with your existing clinic and things not working. And it's about, when do you decide, through trying naturally or through trying with a fertility clinic, that something needs to change? What is next? So the first thing I would say is, I think you've got to just take stock really of where you're at, and think about how long you've been actively trying, and your age, if you're under 35, if you're over 35, and the impact this is having on your life and your relationships, and if you've had any help and what that's looked like, and is that working for you? If you're with a private clinic, are you satisfied? Are things being changed? Are things being looked at? Are things being investigated when you're having more and more failed treatment? How much money have you spent? How much money is left to spend? Do you feel cared for? Do you feel like it's the right clinic? If you're still trying naturally, are you ready to move towards somebody giving you some support? And that might not look like IVF. There are many clinics out there will rush people through to IVF, but there are also lots of people that don't need IVF. And there are clinics out there that will support people to try and get pregnant naturally. And there's definitely something here to be said about considering as well that, it's worthwhile finding out what the root cause of your infertility is, because that may then mean that actually you can go on to conceive naturally. Or if IVF is still the best solution for you, you can go into IVF knowing that you've got the best chances of success, because things can appear okay and not be. And sometimes some of these things are really easy fixes. But if you know what's going on sooner, then you can make sure that things are in an optimal condition to be able to go ahead and have the treatment you want, or to be able to go ahead and continue trying naturally, knowing that actually everything is okay. And if anything isn't, it can be worked on to support you through that natural conception. And that can be so eye-opening for people in terms of getting answers, but also in terms of getting that really tailored support that might not always be IVF. So that's something to consider as an option as well. I would think as well about what your next step might be. So, is it going to your GP and it's going with very, I would say, low expectations of what they can actually give you? They may offer to do some baseline blood tests, very basic, may often do a basic semen analysis. They may show something, but more often than not, don't necessarily. But it's worth, if you want, to go and have a conversation with your GP to find out what support is available, if you're here in the UK on the NHS. But just bear in mind that there is very little on offer for people. Do your research about if your area offers IVF, funded IVF, and who they offer it to and who they don't offer it to as well. Because again, people can waste a lot of time getting a referral from a GP only to find out that they don't qualify when this is information that's out there that you will be able to find out now. And the level of testing that is actually needed to get to the bottom of people's infertility is much more than what a GP can offer you. So would you like your next step to be more advanced testing, perhaps? Perhaps that's your next step. That's something I can help you with if you would like me to. But just kind of having a bit of a plan, knowing what your options might be. Maybe your next step is IVF. Maybe your next step is egg donation. But just kind of thinking what it might be, making sure that you understand what options are available to you and how long things take, and knowing when it is time to ask for help, knowing when it is time to come to somebody like myself to make this so much easier for you, to match you to somewhere that can help you with the goals that you have got and based on your history and your circumstances and your budget. And speaking to an expert that can medically look at you through the clinics that I collaborate with to be able to give you a really tailored view of what support could look like for you in your next step in line with your goals. Our eventual goal, of course, is to grow our family and have a baby, but actually there are other steps apart from IVF. Maybe it is IVF, but there are other things that can be done to support people. And sometimes it's about getting answers and clarity actually first and trying to conceive naturally, or getting the answers and clarity knowing that when you're going into a new cycle of IVF or your first cycle of IVF or your next cycle of IVF, that things have been checked. Because sometimes, like the client that I spoke to last week, they went to have some advanced testing done. They've been trying for years and years and years, and everything appeared to be fine on paper. And then they discovered that she had a lot of inflammation in her endometrium and her cervix was closed. She would never have been able to conceive and carry a pregnancy through to full term naturally or through IVF had she not have known this. They could have spent thousands of pounds. And on top of that, thousands of pounds on wasted IVF cycles, the heartache, the time. Awful. Whereas very quickly after having these tests done, they had answers. And they're actually now a really good candidate for trying naturally with support from the clinic around that as well. And if not, they then have a plan and they can move to IVF with much more confidence. But this has potentially saved them a lot of money and a lot of time and has given them clarity and answers so they can make really informed decisions. And this is so important. And she said to me, you need to shout about this more, Emma, because there's so many people that will be listening to your podcasts that you'll be speaking to who, like, they don't know what the next step is, but they know they want some answers and they know that they want to move into perhaps trying naturally with some support, as well as the kind of assisted fertility side of things like IVF. So it's knowing maybe that it's an option that perhaps I don't talk about enough. So I'm here to tell you that that is an option to you as well. You can go out and you can have significant testing done and really quickly as well and get answers back so that you can then move on with a plan, because a lot of these things take so much time. And to even try and coordinate that level of testing in the UK, as an example, would be logistically much more difficult, more time consuming. The processes would take more time and it would cost you a fortune. So, you can go and have these things done very quickly within like 3 days and come back with answers and a plan. And at a much cheaper cost than here in the UK. So if you're listening to this and you're feeling stuck because you're with a fertility clinic and things aren't working, you've had multiple failed cycles, maybe you've had multiple losses, maybe you have unexplained infertility, maybe you're trying naturally, it's just not happening and you want to know why, maybe you just want some support to look at everything, make sure things are tip top to support you with that natural conception side of things. And I can help you with that if you need help. Because all too often, clinics will jump to IVF being the next step but actually, it's not always needed. It might be your next step. It might be the next step that you want to take. But it's just, again, having the knowledge that IVF isn't always the next step for people when they're struggling to conceive. And that having treatment, testing in your own country is your only option. It's not your only option. There are other options in other countries which are fantastic, where you can go to get support with whatever you want your next steps to look like. And of course, in terms of what your next steps look like will depend on whether you're going via the NHS, whether you're looking to pursue things privately in your own country, like here in the UK, or whether you're going to go abroad. But whatever you do, start to think about these things before you reach breaking point. Because the earlier you understand that there are some choices and you understand how things work and how long things take, the less overwhelmed it'll be when you are in the thick of things. If you are thinking about these things earlier, it's always better than perhaps finding out when you're in the NHS system, actually, this is going to take a long time, or actually, we don't qualify for anything, or actually, you've wasted a lot of my time or our time. Or maybe you've just started trying naturally and you're kind of thinking, what happens if things don't happen? If you've got this knowledge, then you can look into things before things get desperate, because that's what happens to lots of us. It gets to the point where we are absolutely desperate to have a baby, and that's when it really does become so all-consuming. And if you are looking at private options, or you have the option to look at private options, then there are perhaps more options here that maybe you hadn't known existed. So I wanted to bring these to you to tell you, because when you get to the point where you're like, we've been trying a while now, or these IVF cycles aren't working, people are like, well, I don't know what to do. So if this is you, I really hope that this episode has been useful. And if you would like to explore how I can help you with what your next steps might look like, then please do book a complimentary, no obligation call with me. I'll drop the link in the show notes and we can have a chat about what your next steps might look like. Because ultimately, I am you. I've been where you are, and I know how hard this is. And I want to help as many of you as I can, as many as possible, which of course I can do through this podcast, through my blog, through social media. But some of you will need that deeper level of guidance and support. So if this is you, then let's have a chat and let's see how I can help you. And in the meantime as well, if you haven't watched my free training, which tells you all about going abroad, the highlights and the watch outs too, to help you to learn more, maybe even to help you to make a decision about if going abroad is right for you or not, then I'm also going to drop a link to that for you in the show notes, and that is completely free. Until next week, my friends, I shall speak to you later. Bye. If you are facing more obstacles than options and want to learn more about how to overcome your fertility testing and treatment challenges in your home country so that you too can fast track to growing your family and on your terms, then check out my free training at yourivfabroad.co.uk/free masterclass. Don't forget to rate and subscribe so you don't miss an episode and so that I can reach and help more people. Thanks for listening.